Good morning everyone, especially to our life and works of Rizal instructor. Ma'am, good morning. My task this morning is to discuss the Felibusterismo. But before we start, let us pray first. For all the Catholic, please sign of the cross. Ginoo, salamat ning takna sa kabuntagon. Din ako nagakandak sa screen recording video discussion. Hinaot ikaw maghatag og giya o kaalam diri kanako sa pag-deliver sa mga message para masabtan nila ang mga detalye niini ug hinaot nga kini nga discussion magmalampuson kay wala kami arang mahimo kung wala ikaw. Busa kining tanan akong gipasalamatan ug gilauman nga madawat sa ngalan ni Jesus. Amen. Okay, let's start. My topic is El Filibusterismo. Ang El Filibusterismo mao kini ang ikaduhang nobela nga gisulat ni Jose Rizal. Sequel kini o karugtong sa Noli Me Tangere. El Pili ang popular nga tawag niini. Ang El Pili usa ka nobela sa politika nga puno sa kapaitan, kasubo, kasakit, kapintasan ug panimalos aron pukawon ang katawang Pilipino batok sa mga abusadong namumuno. Learning objective. Explain the background why Rizal wrote El Filibusterismo. Explain the theme and key message of the novel. Discuss the plot of the novel. Discuss the major characters of the novel. Background. Dr. Jose Rizal dedicated the book to the three friars, Gomez, Burgos, and Zamora, who were executed because of their supposed participations in the first revolutionary campaign of modern Philippines nationalism, the Mutiny of Cavite. Rizal's message in El Filibusterismo is clear. He wanted Filipino to have better lives, having wrote the novel to show his countrymen that proper education and decent living for all are achievable. Summary. Simon wanted an exhausted ghost to the house of Padre Florentino to hide from the civil guards who are sent to arrest him and take him into custody. Simon drank a poison that reveals his true identity to Padre Florentino, that he Simon the jeweler is in fact Juan Crisostomo Ibarra, the fugitive believed to have died in the rivers years ago. He admits that everything is his futile attempt to corrupt the government and the society so that he could start a revolution to free the country from the bonds of Spain. Padre Florentino corrects Simon, telling him that freedom cannot be won by violence and the shedding of innocent blood, but by proper education, hard work, and long suffering. Theme. El Filibusterismo theme seems to focus on how to reach a social reform and revolutions. A number of chapters have long dialogues of text that seems to resemble debates. An example being chapter 7, Simon, in which Simon tries to convince Basilio to join the bloody revolutions, almost like Darth Vader trying to convince Locke to join the dark side. This represents Rizal fading hopes for reforms against his long-held abhorrence and aversions to revolution. The book focused on the inevitable revolutions and whether or not the Philippines should rebel peacefully and diplomatically or violently. Plot. In the events of the previous novel, Crisostomo Ibarra, a reform-minded mestizo who tried to establish a modern school in his hometown of San Diego and marry his childhood sweetheart, was falsely accused of rebellion and presumed dead after a shootout following his escape from prison. Elias, his friend, who was also a reformer, sacrificed his life to give Crisostomo a chance to regain his treasures and fly the country and hopefully continue their crusades for reforms from abroad. After a 13 years absence from the country, a more revolutionary Crisostomo has returned, having taken the identity of Simon, a mysterious wealthy jeweler whose objective is to drive the government to commit as much abuse as possible in order to drive people into revolution. Simon goes from town to town, presumably to sell his jewels. Researching San Diego, he detoured to a forested land once owned by the Ibaras to retrieve more of his treasures buried in the mausoleum. There is true identity as Crisostomo Ibarra is discovered by a now-grown Basilio who was also in the mausoleum visiting his mother's grave. In the years since the death of his mother, Basilio had been serving as Capitan Tiago, servant in exchange for being allowed to study, and is now an aspiring doctor on his last year at university, as well as administrator and aspirant there to Capitan Tiago wealth. Simon reveals his motive to Basilio and offers him a place in his plans to secure of his place in the words Basilio declined. At Barrio Sagpang in the town of Tiani, Simon stayed at the house of the village, Cabeza de Barangay Talis, having suffered misfortune after misfortune in recent years. Cabisang Talis is unable to resist the temptation to steal Simon's revolver and join the bandits in Los Baños. Simon joined his friend, the Captain General, who is then taking a break from a hunting excursion. In a friendly game of cards with him and his cronies, Simon raised the stake higher and half-jokingly secured blank order for deportations, imprisonment, and summary execution from the Captain General. Later on, Simon goes to Manila and meet Quiroga, a wealthy Chinese businessman and aspiring consul general for the Chinese Empire. Knowing Quiroga is heavily in his debt, Simon offered him a steep discount if the former stored his massive arsenal of rifles in Quiroga's warehouse to be used presumably for extortion activities with Manila elite. Despite his hatred of guns and weaponry, Quiroga reluctantly agrees to do the job and use his bazaar as a front. During the Quiapo Fair, as a taking heads exhibit ostensibly organized by an American named Mr. Leeds but strictly commissioned by Simeon, is drawing popular acclaim. Padre Bernardo Salvi, now chaplain of the convent of the Four Clares, attends one of the performances. The exhibit is set in Tolmaic exhibit but features a tale that closely resembled that our Crisostomo Ibarra and Maria Clara are and their fate under Salvi. His show ends with an ominous vow of revenge. Deeply overcome with guilt and fear, Salvi recommends the show be banned but not before Mr. Leeds sails for Hong Kong. Months pass and the night of Simon revolution comes. Simon's visit Basilio in Tiago house and tries to convince him again to join his revolution. He reveals his plan for the attack. A cannon volley shall be fired, at which point Cabisang Talis, now a bandit identifying himself as Matalanglawin, and Simon, who managed to deceive and recruit a sizable rogue force among the government troops, will lead their force into the city. The leaders of the church, the university's course of bureaucrats, the Captain General himself, as well as the bulk of officers guarding are all conveniently located in one location, the theater, where a controversial and much hyped performance of Les Clots de Carnivals is taking place. While Simon and Matalanglawin direct their force, Basilio and several others are to raid the convent of the Four Clares and rescue Maria Clara. However, Basilio reports to Simon that Maria Clara did just that afternoon after suffering the tri- tra- tribals of monastic life under Salvi, who always lusted after her. Simon, driven by grief, averts that the attack and becomes crestfallen throughout the night. It will be reported later on that he suffered an accident that night, leaving him confined to his bed. The following days, posters threatening violence to the leaders of the university and the government are found at the university doors. A performance-oriented student group to which Basilio belonged is named the primary suspects. The members are arrested, including Basilio, despite his absence from the group's mock celebration. They are eventually freed through the intercessions of relatives except for Basilio, who is an orphan and has no means to pay for his freedom. During his imprisonment, he learns that Captain Tiago has died, leaving him with nothing. It is revealed that Tiago will was actually forged by his spiritual advisors, Padre Rini, who also supplies him with opium. His childhood sweetheart, Holly, has committed suicide to avoid getting raped by Paris Phrase Camora when she tried asking for help on Basilio's behalf, and that he has missed his graduation and will be required to study for another year, but not with no funds to go by. Released through the intercessions of Simon, a darkened, disillusioned Basilio joined Simon cause wholeheartedly. Simon, meanwhile, has been organizing a new revolution, and he reveals his plan to a now committed Basilio. The wedding of Juanita Pilais and Paulita Gomez will be used to coordinate that attack upon the city. As the Pilais and Gomez families are prominent members of the Manila elite, leaders of the church and civil government, are invited to the reception. The Captain General, who declined to extend his tenures despite Simon's urging, is leaving in 2 days and is the guest of honor. Simon will personally deliver a pomegranate-shaped crystal lamp as a wedding gift. The lamp is to be placed on a plant at the reception's venue and will be bright enough to illuminate the entire hall, which was also walled with mirrors. After some time, the light will flicker as if to go out. When someone attempts to raise the wick, a mechanism hidden within the lamp containing fulminated mercury will detonate, igniting the lamp, which is actually filled with nitroglycerin, killing everyone in an enormous blast. Seeing Basilio de Minor's Isaganis is temporarily rather belatedly unnerved by the revolutions. Isagani rushes into the house, seizes the lamp, leaving the hall in darkness, and threw into the river. With this, Simon's second revolutions fails as well. In the following days, as the trapping at the reception's venue are torn down, sunk containing gunpowder are discovered hidden under the boards all over the house. Simon, who had directed the renovations, is exposed with his friend. The Captain General having left for Spain, Simon is left without his protector and is forced to flee. A manhunt ensues and Simmons is chased as far away as the shores of the Pacific. He then spends the rest of his days hiding in the ancestral mansions of Padre Florentino, Isagani's uncle. One day, the lieutenant of the local Guardia Civil informs Florentino that he received an order to arrest Simon that night. In response, Simon drinks the slow-acting poison which he always kept in a compartment on his treasure's chest. Simons then makes his final confessions to Florentino. First reveals his true name. To Florentino's shock, he goes on to narrate how 13 years before, as Crisostomo Ibarra, he lost everything in the Philippines despite his good intentions. Crisostomo sure vengeance, retrieving some of his family treasures, Elias buried in the Ibarra Mausoleum in the forest. Crisostomo fled to foreign land and engaged in trade. He took part in the war in Cuba, eating first and side and then another, but always profiting. There Crisostomo met the captain general who was then a major, whose goodwill he won first by loans of money and afterwards by covering for his criminal activity. Crisostomo braved his way to secure the major promotion to Captain General and his assignment to the Philippines. Once in the country, Crisostomo then used him as a blind tool and incited him to all kinds of injustice, availing himself of the Captain General's insatiable lust for gold. The confession is long and arduous, and night has fallen when Crisostomo finishes. In the end, Florentino assures the dying man of God's mercy, but explains that his revolution failed because he has chosen means that God cannot sanction. Crisostomo bitterly accepts the explanation and thus, realizing that the arresting officers will confiscate Crisostomo's provisions. Florentino divests him of his jewels and casts them into the sea, proclaiming that should people need wealth for a righteous cause, God will provide the means to draw them out, adding that they are better hidden at the bottom of the sea in the meantime, where they cannot be found to be used for distorting justice on inciting greed. Key message: Fighting for freedom, the novel inspired Filipino people to fight for their freedoms against the oppressive and abusive Spaniards. Presence of corrupt government depicted the self-serving government officials novel accurately in the form of friars. Importance of education. The novel show how officials tried to monopolize educations and that not everybody had better access to education. Major characters: Simon, Crisostomo Ibarra in disguise, presumed dead at the end of Noli Me Tangere. Ibarra has returned at the wealthy jeweler Simon. Basilio, son of Sisa and another characters from Noli Me Tangere in the events of El Pili. He is an aspiring and so far successful physician on his last year at university and was waiting for his license to be released upon his graduation. Isagani, Basilio's friend, he is described as a poet, tailor, and more robust than Basilio. Although younger, he is the nephew of Padre Florentino, but is also rumored to be Florentino's son with his old sweetheart before he was ordained as a priest. Father Florentino, Isagani, uncle and a retired priest. Florentino was the son of a wealthy and influential Manila family. He is entered the priesthood at the insistence of his mother. As a result, he had to break an affair with a woman he loved and in despair devoted himself instead to his parish. Father Fernandez, a Dominican who was a friend of Isagani. Following the incident with the posters, he invited Isagani to a dialogue not so much as a teacher with his student but as a friar with a Filipino. Kapitan Tiago, Don Santiago de los Santos, Maria Clara's father, having several land holdings in Pampanga, Binondo, and Laguna, as well as taking ownership of the Ibarra's Bas estate. Tiago still fell into depression following Maria's entry into the convent. Kabisang Talisforo Juan de Dios, as former kabisa di barangay of Barrio Sagpang, Intiani, he was a sugar cane planter who cleared lands he thought belonged to no one, losing his wife and eldest daughter in the endeavor. Father Kamura, the fairest priest of Tiani, Ben Zaib's regular foil, he is said to look like an artilleryman in counterpoint to Ben Zaib's prior looks. He stopped at nothing to mock and humiliate Ben Zaib's liberal pretensions. Analysis in El Filibusterismo provides access to important insight into the failure of Philippine sovereignty that have led to the current state of affairs in our country. It tells about the authors aspiring for democracy and culture by dismantling imperialism through revolution. It reminds us that we need tools if we even want equality and freedom, where human rights are inherent and not a privilege of a few. The novels makes us understand the roots of our country history and how we need to fight for liberation. That's all. Thank you for your watching and listening. God bless us.